How you doing, guys? Eric from revaluation.com. Make sure this audio is working. I can check it myself now because I just opened the YouTube window, and as long it's delayed, but as long as I start, there you go. There I start talking. So I know it's working. You can see my hair is on point today. Everything else is discombobulated. I get thrown off every time. You see, I'm a Florida man. I'm used to those Publix wings. You just go in and get they're not even breaded. They're just like naked baked wings. Perfect, delicious, reasonably priced. Shopping is indeed a pleasure. Here, I get these overbreaded, dry, overpriced, diseased little things. Wretched. Wretched excuse for wing bar. And that's not all we have to deal with today because now we also have some multiple intelligent commentators disagreeing on something that I hold very near to, dear in my heart, which you know is gold. Started out as, I think, iron till it's bombarded with neutrons in the unimaginably hot and energetic conditions inside colliding neutron stars until they're blasted all over the universe in their eventual supernova death, some of which landed here, and I will get as much of it into my grubby little hands as possible. I need more. We're getting down to the wire. I need to get all of it, and I can't get any of it. I need some money or more money. But this is what we're going to talk about, specifically gold revaluation. First of all, I wanted to let you guys know, because I didn't say last time, that for the drawing in the beginning of September, we'll be giving away a micro rule of wasteland survival fishing kit packed up neatly for you guys right here. We will be giving away this excellent nuclear, I can't even say, I still can't say it, even reading it, nuclear. I'm George Bush over here. Biological and chemical survival manual. U.S. Armed Forces. It does say it's everything you need to know to protect yourself and your family, but you guys know that if you really want to survive the apocalypse, you have to buy the Rule the Wasteland Survival Fishing Kit, because this doesn't have a survival guarantee for the apocalypse. This does. If you buy the Rule the Wasteland Survival Fishing Kit and you die during the apocalypse, you'll get a full refund. Can't beat that. And the third prize is this previously owned but in excellent condition. I forget the model name of this one. This Gerber knife, as you can see, flawless, never been used. Very cool, slick knife. Kind of reminds me of the SOG knives with the blade, like bead blasted type finish. I don't even know what you would call that. Very ergonomic handle. And one thing I really like about this sheath is it's great for if you wanted to put it on carriers and plate carriers and stuff like that, because it actually locks in. But it's not awkward to get out. It's a simple thumb release, so it's some active retention, which is rare for knives. And most of the time they just are friction tension with the Kydex sheath, which is usually fine. But not only could it be pulled out or in a struggle or some sort of crazy situation, it also has a lot. If you pull it in and out a lot, it wears on the knife, unsightly marks and stuff. Whereas this is just securely locked in, and you still can get it out with one hand with that button. So that Gerber knife, the micro fishing kit, and the nuclear survival manual are all going to be giving away. Is that satin finish? Yeah, so what's the difference between satin and bead blasted when it comes to metal? I'm no expert on those things. I don't think bead blasted is really a thing for knives, but it is a very cool, and this is a super comfortable knife, at least for my hands. It's got just a little bit of swelling on there. Nice rubberized, no slip. Got like a choil. I'm just throwing out random knife words. But yeah, so Dad on YouTube says, I caught a Hickok 45 vid talking metals today. Ain't seen one of his vids in years. Yeah, he's one of those channels that I've known about for years, but I don't subscribe to just a lot of the strict firearm channels. Just makes me want to buy more guns. It's an expensive hobby, and I'm trying to actually cut down on the individual different types of guns that I have. Streamline. I still want more total guns, but I'm trying to cut down, make everything streamlined, cross-compatible, that sort of thing. Not tons of different calibers, not tons of different holsters, not tons of different magazines, not all that stuff. Because I'm trying to get ready for the apocalypse here. As much as I just love guns as like a hobby and stuff, I'm not a millionaire. So we're going to get stuff that is and I also don't have infinite space, which is easily becomes a problem when you're a prepper. So we're gonna try to stick with stuff that all uses the same calibers, all uses the same magazines. So like AR-15 mags, Glocks, 9mm, 5.56, a couple 12 gauges, and got my 308 and everything. And but don't get me wrong, if the opportunity strikes, I will still always add a Barrett 50 cal into the fold. They're always welcome. That's the bucket list. But yeah, so what we're going to talk, yeah, Sydney Sweeney does have great guns. There's actually a video of her at Taryn's place shooting for some movie role. So great genes all around. Big nationalism is my political party. It's what I've always been about. And you can throw the guns in there too. What more could you ask for? I'm actually wearing American Eagle jeans right now. Coincidence or destiny? And I've also got the baby blues. So we're pretty much meant to be together. What do you think? Also, before you guys get too excited, I'm actually more into the Latinas, the dark ones. But there's nothing wrong with Sydney Sweeney. But we're here to talk about gold. So if you've been around this side of the gold and silver side of the interwebs for the past few weeks, obviously gold and silver is doing extremely well. Platinum metals, platinum's up like 40% for the year. It's having a great resurgence after years of being more expensive than gold. It had a while where it was actually significantly cheaper than gold. And then all of a sudden it is blasting up. I saw an interview just last night. It was so late last night, it might have been this morning. Almost certainly was this morning. And the CLM says, "Oh my, he's a fascista." Yeah, there was someone posted one of those things that they were showed the picture of Sydney Sweeney, with her jugs out, and they were like, "If you like this, you're a fascist." So I just posted that clip from what is it? What the hell is that movie? Doctor Strangelove, where the guy's like fighting. But in case there's any fusions, I am not a fascist. I find National Socialists repugnant, and I'm all about doing things that the government doesn't want me to do, so I can't really be a fascist. But it is funny nonetheless to troll these people. Where was I? Platinum. Yeah, so there was a video I watched this morning, investigation details matter, um, about how someone was looking at all the platinum that's being hoarded by like these certain technological or government groups, and they were suspecting that there's some kind of emergent technology or something that is going to be needing platinum, because traditionally platinum is mostly an industrial metal. It is in jewelry and stuff, but an industrial metal, one of the bigger uses would be catalytic converters in vehicles. As vehicles got more and more like environmental regulations they had to meet, this became more and more applicable. People would have to actually replace their catalytic converters in these crappy communist places that have smog checks and stuff, whereas in the past you might just let it burn out. But then as electric vehicles came in the line, kind of decreased the amount, and they were able to use other chemicals and materials somewhat too. So for a while we saw the price for platinum actually go down a lot, but now it's spiked again. So who knows? Who knows? Who freaking knows? But could just be being buoyed up by gold and silver as well. But the big thing that everyone's talking about, which would be significant, obviously it's not directly related to preparedness, but when you're big into the gold and silver, something that might make gold and silver price go to 5, 10, 15, or even $20,000 an ounce or more in a relatively short amount of time is something that we need to pay attention to. And that would be if there was any sort of revaluation of gold. And this is one of those things, just like money and the creation of money. And because I just watch where a lot of people just simply, even people who are interested and educated in the field, don't understand the nuance and the distinction between simple concepts. And I think some of that, there's a misunderstanding when I'm referencing the disagreement, which I have in the title, between Francis Hunt, the market sniper, and Maneco 64 and Clive, is it Clive Thompson, about the possibility of there being a gold revaluation. I think some of this is simply terms, people talking past each other when they're not really even talking about the same thing, so to speak. But because I've been on the record on my videos for a long time that I really do not think, I think it's extremely unlikely for the US to get any kind of strict gold standard money like we had in the past, where the dollar or our new currency, whatever it is defined by a certain weight of gold. I think going back to that in a direct sense like that is extremely unlikely simply because it limits the government in a lot of ways. It would be great. It's pretty much the most sound money you can have. He said, this is money. We're going to add one layer of abstraction by representing it with these notes so that you don't have to carry around the physical gold and you can divide it and all thing up more easily. But it's money. Gold is money. That's about as sound money as you can get. But I don't think we're going back to that. Like I said, it restricts them in a way that they have no reason to tolerate when all these other options are available to them. Like I mentioned a couple live streams ago, people, like the quote says, there's not 1 in 100 people actually even now understand money and how it's made. Even people who are in the industry, professors of economics, bankers and stuff, will still come out and say things like the simplified money multiplier method in an explanation of how money is created in terms of fractional reserve lending and things like that. Like people will say you can open at least as I haven't looked at a college textbook very recently, but I remember at least back when I was in college, so no more than 15, 20 years ago, you could open a college, and the process hasn't changed. You could open a college textbook on economics and finance and banking, and it would tell you the simplified money multiplier method for how money is created, which is the simplified method, which is not simplified, it's just a lie. It's not any more simple. In fact, the real method by which money is created is so simple, the mind is repelled. So they come up with a fake way that seems to make more sense to people. So people go, oh, okay. And the fake way is what's in even textbooks and what bankers and professors and stuff will tell you is that fractional reserve lending means that a bank will take in deposits of $1,000. And when you have a 9-to-1 reserve requirement, it means they can loan out 900 of those dollars. And then you will only have $100 less left. And that's how bank runs can happen because they've loaned it all out. And then when people come to get their cash, it's not there because it's all loaned out. And only one of the 10 people that put $100 in can actually get their $100 out. And that's not how it works. It's actually far, far more fucked up than that. Because what really happens is banks are just literally allowed to create money. They loan out money that they do not have. So when they have the reserve requirement, which in many cases now has just been sort of eliminated, but when it was originally 9-to-1 or whatever, means that if they had $1,000 on their balance sheets, which could include deposits and stuff and other just cash that they had and whatever, if they had $1,000 there, it meant they could loan out $9,000. So, and people are like, what do you mean? Where does that money come from? It just is loaned into existence. That's exactly how money is created in this system. Is that when I got a mortgage, and that's when I always ask people, when people want to argue about like economics and what the government should do to fix the economy, fix money, I'm like, all right, before we argue about this, let me ask you a question. When I got a mortgage from the bank and they said, you're approved for this mortgage, and they put that money into my account so I can go pay the guy who has the house. They say, you're approved. Here's the money you're borrowing from us. It's in my account now. Where did that money come from? Where was it right before then? And they usually are just like, what do you mean? And I'm like, literally, where they're transferring into my account from where? Where did it come from? And they're, if they have an answer at all, it's wrong. And because the answer is it didn't exist. It's loaned into existence. That's why banks have the biggest buildings in the country because they're allowed to just make money. And that's why the Federal Reserve doesn't really even have complete control over anything in the economy because they don't, something like 90 to 95% of money is created at the retail level through loans like housing loans, through unsecured personal loans, through credit cards, through all these other things. So they can affect the behavior or try to by manipulating prime interest rates and basic level interest rates, which can raise or lower the cost to borrow, but it doesn't really control it directly. They can't stop a bank from giving me a mortgage or whatever, not overtly. And that's why I think it was Lynn Alden in one of these recent videos was talking about how some of these things, because government spending is so inelastic, the things that should be or that should be deflationary, like raising the rates for government bonds, can actually have the opposite effect because the government has to borrow this money no matter what. And when you raise it's because they're already spent it, basically already spending more, so they have to get this money. And so raising the cost of that, they're going to borrow just as much. So it actually creates more money when it was the whole point was to be like, we'll decrease the amount of borrowing by raising the rate. It doesn't actually work that way. Okay, so before I get into the revaluation, because I keep going on tangents on the disgusting nature by which our monetary system works. All right, so we talked about Sydney Sweeney. That was enjoyable. Larry says, I wish I would have learned that earlier. All my toys are all different caliber pain in the butt. Gregory Thompson says, the value of gold and silver goes up. Doesn't that also mean the value of the dollar goes down? May have already been mentioned. I just got here. Not technically, and that's why I don't like the way people throw around words like inflation. I think inflation does originally and should exclusively be used to describe an increase in the supply of money and credit, which in our system is the same thing, not an increase in prices. Those result very often from inflation, but not always. The government, let's say, could make $50 trillion, and if they go put it in a room in the Federal Reserve and it never goes anywhere, there will be no inflation-related price increases. The inflation has happened. There is now many, many times more money than there was before, or not many times more, but there's a huge increase in the amount of money. 50 trillion extra dollars exist, but there will be no price increases because the money's just sitting there. Versus if Taylor Swift comes out and says, I love Rule the Wasteland survival fishing kits, the price of them will go through the roof. But nothing has changed in the monetary system, the supply of money. That's not inflation. It's just a price increase. That can happen due to all sorts of supply chain related things, demand related issues, all sorts of stuff. Mouth is dry now. But so if the value of gold and silver goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean the value of the dollar has gone down, because there's just a global market for gold, priced in dollars. Like it could go up if everyone is in a technical sense. I mean, if you're only valuing the dollar by how much gold you can buy, then you could say that. But let's say China comes out and says, and Russia and every BRICS nation tells their people, you have to buy gold now. It's a law that you have to put 10% of your money into gold. The price of gold is going to go through the roof, but the price of everything else in dollars will not change. So the dollar really hasn't gotten weak, like worse or lost value in relation to anything else except gold. And like I said, the same thing could happen with Rule the Wasteland survival fishing kits, or when eggs got really expensive because of them killing a ton of birds because of supposed bird flu. That wasn't technically, I mean, the dollar is getting weaker, but other things can cause things to get more expensive. Isn't just a singular function of the dollar getting weaker, but that is there in the background the whole time. Bam says, how many different calibers do you have? The only hard money in that transaction. Oh, no, sorry. How many different calibers do you have? I have all the common calibers. I have 22. I have a 32, which I probably don't need, but I've had for a while. It's a little Beretta Tomcat. I like that thing. So I have 22, 32, 380 automatic for the LCPs and stuff. I've got 9mm, 40 cal, 45. I have 223, 7.62 by 39, 308, 12 gauge. And I think that's it. I certainly don't need more calories, except doing it like I was mentioning earlier. My harem of weapons is always open for the Barrett 50 cal. King of battle right there. The only hard money in that transaction is the interest you're paying the bank. Yeah, and that shows you like when this money is loaned into my account for my mortgage that did not exist before, there is an interest rate attached to that I have to pay back. So let's say they gave me whatever it was, $300,000. Eventually, I have to pay them back more than $300,000. So because the way money is loaned into existence, money is created by these loans, and a loan means you have to pay back that plus some. There is always more money that needs to be paid back than there is money that actually exists to pay it back. Because any other money you would get to pay it back also is loaned into existence with an interest rate attached to it. So that's why you can't really have an ongoing deflation in a system like this, and why they will always, because the money literally will disappear and the entire system will like seize up. There will be no money. When loans are like defaulted on, and like money is destroyed. When loans are paid off, money is like removed from the system, etc. So that's why they will never go that route, because it would just completely seize the system to a halt. There would be no money. And they will always go for the inflationary way out. The definition is an old dictionary I own, says basically printing too much money. Yeah, I think when I looked in my old dictionary, it didn't even reference financial for any inflation. Oh no, it's in 1952. Let's find inflation. We're gonna EFCHI. So we're gonna look up inflation in my ancient tome. Oh, we got I. Where's my I? There we go. Inflation. Let's see what inflation says in the 1952 LM. I bet there's people who are significantly younger than me who have never actually looked in a dictionary. INA, INC. We're going to look it up. INC. Inconceivable. Incurvation. I'm going to have to look at that one later. Inflammable. All right. Flammable. Inflate. Inflatable. Inflation. To blow into. The act of inflating or the condition of being inflated. Aha, they do have it. Number 3. Because number 2 is a state of being puffed up, as with vanity or conceit. And number 3, undue expansion or an overissue of currency. Simple. It's not an increase in prices. It is an undue expansion or an overissue of currency. Thank you, Mr. Webster. 1952, before our words were all rat fucked to non-existence. Exploring with Larry says 410, 12 gauge, 10 gauge, 10 gauge, 20. How often do you see 10? 30, 30, 303. Yeah, there's some good. If I was hunting, I mean, 308 works well for hunting, but if I did a lot of big hunting, I would probably also throw in like a 300 Winchester mag, or at least a 273, or a, you know, something like that. But anyway, so there's currency issues. There are price issues. They can be related, not specifically automatically related. But what this was about was people talking about gold revaluation, and how Francis Hunt, the market ticker, or not the market sniper, the market ticker is Carl Denninger. He's also smart. But the market sniper and Maneco 64 and Clive talking about gold revaluation. So the market sniper came out and did a video and saying like, all these people talking about the gold revaluation, it's not going to happen. Francis, or not Francis, he's Francis. My brain does not work. It's because I got those inferior Albertson's wings and not the Puppet's wings. He's saying that when Scott Bessent came out and said, because that's the thing that a lot of people were talking about, the revaluation of gold, are pointing to Scott Bessent coming out and saying, we are going to, or we really need to monetize the assets on the balance sheet. And then, so Market Sniper came out and said, they're not going to use gold. They're going to use like the land. They're going to use all these other assets in the United States and everything. And I've been on record, like I said earlier in this video, I do not think we're going to get a strict gold standard in terms of money defined by a certain weight of gold. And because seeing how much Trump is into the cryptos and these stable coins, and just knowing that they're not going to limit themselves like that, but that at some point when these currencies start to fail, you will probably have to back it with something, that I very much think we're going to get some sort of mixed commodity backed currencies. And they might use oil, they might use copper, they might use these other things. And he was pointing to the same sort of thing, but he was saying that like all the assets that the US has, why would they use gold, and sort of the same things. But there's a little bit of a nuance there, because first of all, the exact quote that Scott Bessent said was monetizing assets on the balance sheet. So you can point to all the assets that the United States as a country has within its borders, all the minerals, all the oil, all the natural gas, all that stuff. But that is not an asset on the balance sheet. That is something that the government could buy and use it to back as a basket of commodities, back a currency with. But that is not an asset on the balance sheet. So that's my first minor critique with that argument, is that if you're taking Scott Besson at his word that they're going to monetize the assets on the balance sheet, gold is really the only asset on the balance sheet that could be monetized like that currently. And but they could do the same thing with like Bitcoin or something else too, to buy it or whatever. So little quibble saying on the balance sheet. And also the whole process of revaluing gold that like Clive Thompson and Maneco 64 and all the rest of them are talking about has nothing to do with the currency or backing. These are two completely separate things, which I don't really see the point of the revaluation of gold, because I mean, long term, the point is that it gets you a bunch of money through a fake hand waving Fugazi, you printing money. That's all it really is. Like I've said in the last live stream, every single thing that the monetary system does is just to obfuscate the fact that the government just makes money. They certainly are even constitutionally allowed to just make money. You could just create it. You don't need to do all this nonsense to print money. The reason they do it, adding in private banks, borrowing from them with the Federal Reserve and everything, is simply because it confuses people to the point that they think that something more scientific and complex is going on, other than them just being the government just being like, yeah, there's more money now. We have more money because we just made it, because they know that would make people angry and people wouldn't trust the system. But not only is that exactly what they're doing, they're just doing it in a more expensive, convoluted way simply to confuse everyone. And that's exactly what the gold revaluation would be. It's just an accounting trick. So currently, because the government is allowed to do all sorts of accounting tricks that most people can't, most companies and stuff not only can't do, it would probably be illegal, but we have a certain hundreds of tons of gold, or maybe millions of tons, I don't know, on the I think it's several 100,000 tons or something crazy, on the balance sheet that the government owns. And right now in their little spreadsheet, that's listed at $40 an ounce or whatever, $42 an ounce when it was last updated. And even though it's 2025 and I can have conversations with a robot to pass the Turing test, they can't have a spreadsheet that just has the actual market price on there, mark to market every day, like any Excel spreadsheet could do, any random website. And go to AppMax, go to Kitco, there's the price. Why this doesn't just have that on their balance sheet and update it every year, who knows? So what they would do is they would say they could just mark that to market, and then they have all these other assets. But what they would do is even more weird, is they would, because right now they would like buy back from the Fed. The Treasury would buy back these gold certificates from the Fed at like this price it is currently worth, $40. Then they would revalue gold and say, okay, now gold is worth $15,000 an ounce. And then they would sell that to the Treasury for gold certificates, and or to the Fed. And the Fed would just create this money, which if it's $15,000 an ounce for gold would be like, I don't know, $3 or $4 trillion, I think. And they just create, just like they created the mortgage when they just create it, and they're buying these gold certificates and saying that the government, or that they have a bunch of gold that the government owes them, but they're not allowed to ever collect on it, and they can't sell to anyone else. So it's just a complete fucking scam to print money. And that's how it would work. And then you would end up with $3 trillion that the government could spend. And the Fed would just have these gold certificates again, like they do now. And gold would be $15,000 an ounce. But the only way you can like say, because there's a global market for gold. So the only way this would work is if then the government, like I was talking about with the Shanghai Gold Exchange lately, similarly, but the government would have to make them a market maker for gold at $15,000 an ounce. So they wouldn't define gold or define the dollar with a certain amount of gold, but they would have to say, because it doesn't make sense for them to say gold is $50,000 an ounce if nowhere you go into around the world, you like, or in the US, no one's going to give you $15,000 for it. So the government has to be willing to buy gold at $15,000 an ounce. And so they would have to make a bunch more of these certificates and everything that they sell the Fed anytime someone needed to buy gold. So it would be massively inflationary. I don't see how anyone could say it's not inflationary because they would have to buy gold at $15,000 an ounce to almost whoever wanted to sell it to them at that price also, and then use that and every time they did that, they would do the whole same process with the gold certificates. But that has nothing to do with backing the money with gold. It just means that we are always going to give you $15,000 for an ounce of gold. And that would cause gold to flood into the US for a while. At least could cause some weird problems. But my point is, what are you going to do with? So you have $3 trillion now or whatever, right? Maybe more if they make it 20,000. Who knows? It would make the price of gold naturally go up because if you know you can sell gold to the government for $15,000 or $20,000, you could buy it anywhere else for less than that. So no one else is soon is gonna everyone's gonna catch on, and they're not gonna sell it to you for $5,000 an ounce when they know you could just go run and sell to the U.S. government for $15,000 an ounce. But so they end up with this $3 or $4 trillion. So what? The government can already just monetize. They could get the Federal Reserve to directly monetize the debt, which they're eventually going to do anyway. The national debt's almost 40 trillion, right? So what are you going to do with 3 trillion? Pay off people talking about you could pay down the debt. What would be the point of that? You pay off 10% of the debt when you're going into, $2 trillion into the hole every year anyway. That would be useless. So I don't know if they're going to do it just for that reason because it would be pretty inflationary. It would really spike the price of gold. And if they are planning on doing, even including any gold and any sort of, even partially in a basket of commodities that they would eventually back a stable coin with or something like that, or a currency, then they don't want the price to be super high. And you would end up with a few trillion dollars, which I don't see the point. So let's go through the comments. So I think that both of these commentators are correct in some of the things that they're pointing out, but I think most of the conflict there is discussing two different things: the actual gold revaluation versus the currency and it potentially being backed by gold, which are not the same thing. But it could just be a last ditch effort to make people say like, hey, we have, because right now the bond auctions are getting weaker and potentially failing. So people aren't going to directly be able to sell the U.S. government debt to raise the money that they normally need. Maybe they will do this as a last ditch effort before directly monetizing. I don't know. Maybe they'll do it as a way to bring in a bunch of gold into the country. Interesting. High Desert Pioneer says banks are just trying to weasel their way out of being held accountable, and they're pretty damn good at it. They're literally allowed to create money and then also invest your deposits in like whatever hypothecations and rehypothecations, and then lose it all that and go bankrupt and then still get bailed out by us again, taking our money, the taxpayers, when they're literally, imagine being able to create money. Your business is, I can make money, and you still fuck that up and then take more money from the taxpayer. It's how these people aren't like hanging from nooses every year. It just boggles my mind. Dad on YouTube says Andy Scheckman keeps repeating that the Treasury calls its metal holding the gold revaluation account. Yeah. Gregory Thompson says, love that you had a comb as a part of your get home bag on the last SHTF video in the desert. Yeah. Essential. Like I said, my hair's actually on point today, so I'm not upset about that. Gold is the only other tier 1 asset as of right now. Yeah. Exploring with Larry says, yeah, it was fun. I live in a big city. I think if Z alarm happened, the roadways would be so jammed, nowhere to run. Exactly. Unfortunately, that is true. Nice title. It was a good live stream to break down. Who really knows the future, but gold and silver will be there. Exactly. And I think that's the main key to point out is whether or not gold gets revalued, whether or not they actually include it or only it to back or define future currencies here or elsewhere, or, and this is only really the three only outcomes, we just eventually see all these fiat currencies continue to get weaker and weaker and weaker until any sort of new system pops up. No matter what happens, gold and silver are money and valuable commodities, and that's what I'm banking on. Love these accounting tricks. It's up there with just mint $1 trillion platinum coin and everything will be okay. Yeah, and that's another thing that confused people. the platinum coin thing, because people were trying to relate it to platinum. I'm like, the platinum thing has nothing to do with anything. It's not based on platinum. They're not defining the dollar with platinum. That was literally just another trick, kind of like where they were making an excuse for printing money and saying that it wasn't going to cause inflation because this platinum coin would just be, sitting somewhere or whatever. It was exactly the same thing as the gold revaluation scheme, pretty much, where they would sell this coin to the Fed for a bunch of instantly created Federal Reserve notes that the government could spend, and the platinum coin would just sit there and they're not allowed to do anything with it. It wasn't because platinum's worth $1 trillion or that they would change the price of platinum on a market. It was literally just because it sounds better than to say, hey, Fed, give us some money. We need some more money, create it. They're like, we can. And that's what's so crazy about this is people thinking that this is like a real system, that smarter people than them have to like figure out how to manage the economy with like, oh, but the platinum coin, it could be a literal shit coin, a cow patty that they drew in with their finger and said $1 trillion, and the process would be exactly the same. The value would be exactly the same, with the exception of at least the coin of platinum would have however many ounces of platinum actual intrinsic value, where the shit coin wouldn't. But the inclusion of the platinum has nothing to do with anything other than to confuse you about the process of what's actually going on, which is them saying, make more money. But let's not do it in a way that's so simple that people understand that's what's happening. So it's pretty disgusting. And it's more disgusting to me that people don't. And this is why. This is exactly why, when I was talking about why I disagree with Phil Lowe of Bitter Draft about how I think the end game will take place in terms of how beneficial it is for the gold holders, that he has this view. He's right about all the elements that are at play, with the exception of how they're going to just allow the people who did all the right things to be the beneficiaries of their failures when they come to fruition. Is it too many people don't even know what's going on, and when they come out and too few people have gold and silver, that, like he was talking about the Monsanto farms being sold, having to be sold off to everyone who has gold and silver. There's not enough of us, and that these processes are going to take place anyway. So my question to him, I'm gonna have to get him on, because he's right about almost all of this stuff. I just don't see it the way he does for how optimistically he thinks it's going to turn out. And so my question, I think, would be, gold and silver is the best possible element for use as a currency, but it's not literally the only thing that you could use. The world would still go on if gold and silver were Thanos'd out of existence. Well, at least gold, because silver, maybe there's a lot of technologies that couldn't be made. But let's say that just you can use copper for whatever, and that is for no monetary thing can you use gold and silver. What would they use then? What would be the process then? If gold and silver disappeared, how would this process go down at that point? And I think that's more of how it's going to go down anyway, because so few people have gold and silver, that it'll be used initially because it's the best for it when the system breaks. But after that, like, we're not going to be selling it and going around trading everywhere. So like the system's going to have to find another way to do this anyway. And so that's what's going to happen, I think. 99% of Americans think money is currency. They have no idea what money is. Yeah, they think it's when you put $1,000 in the bank, they think they loan out that $1,000 to other people. That sort of thing. Yeah, no, not 1 in 100. No, truly know the process by which money is created. Even people who are like in the industry and stuff, who are in banking, who are in finance, don't truly understand it a lot of times. When did we start making new money to use for loans? When I was young, the banks loan the interest they made on previous loans. Well, they don't actually loan out that money itself. That interest goes onto their balance sheet, and then they are allowed to loan out more money because now they have money. So if they collect $1,000 in interest, they can loan out $9,000 that didn't exist. Phil is delusional with his decentralization pipe dream. Unfortunately, I agree. I think I'm like, I sure as hell hope he's right, but that's way too kumbaya of a for the level of shitstorm that we're going to be unwinding. That, like, we did all the right things, and now here's my gold, and I'm going to get all the land, and then I'm like, I hope, man, I hope. I really do hope. But I tend to think it's pretty delusional too. I think it's much more likely. I think what's 10 times more likely than the way he describes it is all the people who don't have gold being convinced by the government and the banks that we're the ones who fucked it up, and us getting strung up and having our gold robbed from us and stuff. I think that's a hell of a lot more likely than Monsanto being like, shit, we don't have, and here's a 1,000-acre farm for 10 ounces of gold. And then I live, happily ever after as ranch king, sheep ranch king of West Texas or Wyoming or whatever. Although I sure hope he's right. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see it just because I know human nature. I may not know finance as well as he does, but I know human nature and logistics. And that's where this all breaks down. But appreciate you guys watching. I need some water hardcore. My throat's all drying out. So just remember to sign up for the Patreon because we're giving away a Rule the Wasteland Survival Fishing Kit, micro, nuclear preparedness, and biological preparedness manual, and the sweet Gerber knife with active retention sheath. Excellent condition. Appreciate you guys watching. And